Welcome to Fitness Casual. We help you ditch diets and build habits no matter how busy you are or no matter how hungry you are. I'm Andrew Hayes, and with me is I got nothing today, Kat Best. I always make it up
Hi,
on the fly,
everyone.
so this is always off the cuff. I couldn't be clever.
Satiated.
They always, yeah. Very satiated, Kat Best. Kat, do you have a lot of cravings? Anything recent that comes to mind? What have you been craving?
So I don't have a ton of cravings in general, but I lately or last week I had a extreme need for pickled beets. I actually
Ooh.
haven't eaten them in months. They just
What?
kind of like phased out. I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's one
But
of
they
my
just
faves.
kind of phased out of my life. I used to eat them in one specific meal I had like on repeat, and I changed up my meal flow. So it just kind of worked its way out. But last week I was like, I want pickled beets so bad that I went to the grocery store, which I never do, to get them to have for dinner that night. So that also makes me go then, okay, what is it about beets? Is it like the nitric oxide? Like, what is it that I was craving them for? But I did notice that. Or sometimes I do want like a vinegary thing, like a pickle, like a really intense vinegar, like shock to my system. Sometimes I really want.
Maybe it was
How about
electrolyte
you?
craving.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I do love the Love Beats, but they're always sold out. They don't really sell
Yeah.
them at the normal grocery stores, and they do have them in Whole Foods, but they're always sold out. And then the backup is the vinegar one, which I do not like. If you had those,
Yeah.
or not,
Yes.
yeah, I think it is. It's just like more vinegar instead of pickle. It's
Yeah.
not good. I don't like them.
Agreed.
Anyway,
The white vinegar.
yeah, that's what it is. Thank you. I had a craving last week for just a really gross, sugary coffee. If you've ever been to Dutch Bros or one of those kind of drive-through where they put like whipped cream and all this syrup in it, I don't. I usually just take normal lattes, just milk. Occasionally I'll put like a pump or two in it, but I just woke up one day. I was like, it just sounds good. Like plastic cup, sorry to say, just part of the craving, plastic cup, straw in the middle. I ended up not getting it actually, and I think part of the problem is living in Boulder County, Colorado. It's very healthy here. I've noticed a trend of like the types of coffee shops based on where you live. So when I travel, like when we go to Florida or Arizona, I feel like Dutch Bros and those various versions are everywhere, and everyone's like getting their really big coffees on their way to work. And then you go New York City, California, Colorado, you get a lot of like the third wave coffee shop. It's more like go and sit and have a latte or a cappuccino. And so they don't do a lot of like 15 pumps with whipped cream on top. So I haven't gotten it yet, and I'm a little upset, but maybe next week when I'm in
Yeah.
Arizona, I'll get it.
That actually reminds me of, have you seen like the Dubai chocolate thing
No.
going on right now?
No.
It's just some type of chocolate that has either like pistachio in it or something. It's like really popular. That I actually, when I see it, I'm like, ooh, I kind of want to try that. I don't really understand what's going on, but it's like there are these Dubai chocolate bars that are like infamous now, and they look really, really good.
Wow.
So that is one where I'm like, ooh, I could try that right now.
Well,
Or
that's every grocery store does that. They put all the candy at the checkout, which as a parent I hate because it's a constant struggle to be like, we're not buying that. But it's even for me, you go to the grocery store hungry. Like sometimes I go before lunch and there's the Reese's peanut butter cup staring me in the face, and I'm like, man, that would be so good right now because I'm hungry and my body is just like your brain just knows what that
Yep.
taste is going to be. And so that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. How to reduce cravings, understanding the different types of hunger. It is, I would say, outside of I'm really busy, it's the number one thing I hear on calls with clients or prospective clients is I have cravings. I think it's a huge problem. It is definitely a little more complex than I have a sweet tooth. Everyone says that. I understand what they mean when they say that, but it's a lot more than that. We all love sugar. It's been studied. Sugar is something that we crave. Sugar cane ruled the world for a long time. It's something innate to all of us, but there are many, many strategies to reduce your cravings, improve your satiety, live a healthier life while still enjoying the food you love. So we'll get into all of that today. It's one of Kat's areas of specialty.
yes, and we cannot understand cravings if we don't understand hunger and satiety. What do they mean? What is going on with your body when you're experiencing these things? So that's what I'm going to get into first. So if we think about hunger, What is hunger? It's something we all feel, but it does have a biological purpose to ensure that we consume enough energy and we don't die. Like, being hungry is a really good thing. It keeps us alive. It's very helpful when you get the tummy rumbles to remind you that you need to eat. And we all know the feeling when you get hungry and you can't eat for a long period of time, you start to get angry and irritable, and it's pretty quickly how much your focus will shift from whatever else you have going on to eating food if you are really hungry. Like, it's all you think about, it's all you care about. That's pretty fascinating stuff. So there's something called ghrelin that is the hunger hormone. So it's produced in the stomach when the stomach is empty. So if your stomach is emptying out, your body gets a signal to increase the amount of ghrelin, and that's how you feel like the tummy grumbles, and that you know that you're hungry. So this rises before you eat, and then it drops after you eat. So ghrelin is a very important thing when it comes to understanding hunger. And this also does impact the brain, and it triggers the urge to eat. So not only do you feel it, but in your brain, you now want to eat. These are all things that lead to hunger. One fun thing about ghrelin is it's largely dependent on your sleep. So if you are sleep deprived, it can increase ghrelin, which makes you feel hungrier even though you might not be. That's why when people don't sleep, they tend to have more cravings or have a harder time eating healthier foods. There is a hormonal component to what that is. And if we are looking back to thousands of years ago, if you're a human and you're not sleeping, you need food to keep you awake because you're awake to either protect your hut from something terrible. Like, there is a reason you're awake and you're not sleeping, so you need fuel in order to do that. So that's why your body is doing that. It's like very, very smart. Hunger also is influenced by the macronutrients you eat. Protein makes you less hungry, more satiated. If you eat a bunch of carbs, that could increase your hunger levels based on glycemic index. So this can also be highly influenced on the foods that you are eating. So the other side of hunger is satiety. Satiety is the feeling of fullness and satisfaction that stops you from eating. So the satiety hormone is called leptin. That's produced actually by your fat cells, and it signals your brain to stop eating. There are people who, if there's something off about leptin production, they are not getting that signal, and that can lead to overeating. But for most people who have healthy, normal hormones, you have a nice balance here that's telling you it's time to eat, and now it's time to stop eating. GLP-1, so this is really popular right now, that actually is a naturally occurring hormone in the body produced by your intestines that allows you to feel full after eating. So when you eat, your body also releases that, you feel satiated, and you now know it's time to stop eating. Obviously, the synthetic versions of that are on the rise right now, but all that's doing is increasing satiety in your body. That's what it's doing. It's giving your brain the signal that you do not need to eat. That's why these things are very effective for controlling your appetite. And what we want to achieve, and the balance of hunger and satiety, is to be satiated after your meals. So then we go, okay, what increases satiety? The number one thing is meal composition. So if you have, let's say, a really high protein, high fat breakfast, balanced with fiber and whatever, you're going to be very, very satiated. You probably won't be super hungry by the time you get to lunch, but maybe you'll get like a little bit of an indicator it's time to eat. But if your breakfast leaves you 1 hour later feeling like legitimately hungry, the meal composition was not good enough to actually keep you satiated. So definitely make sure your meals are having the protein, fiber, fat, and they are not just mostly carbohydrates. You can have carbohydrate and be full, but you just need to have it in presence with other macronutrients. So your meal composition is incredibly important. Anytime I work with someone who really does struggle with cravings, especially in like the afternoon or whatever, I'm always reinforcing balanced meals as we go throughout the day. I am never encouraging that they eat, a bunch of carbohydrates at one meal and not the other. We're always looking for like a nice, smooth, balanced macronutrient breakdown as far as that goes, because it really is helpful and pretty profound if you just have more balanced meals. Another thing is speed of how fast you eat and mindfulness. It takes 20 minutes for these satiety signals to reach the brain. Most of us don't take 20 minutes to eat. You can actually overeat by thousands of calories in a very short amount of time, and then your brain catches up and is like, wow, I'm really full. So if you're eating too fast, you're not really allowing those signals to go to your brain. So I definitely recommend, if anyone were to eat, stop, wait 20 minutes or maybe 30, see if you still feel hungry, and then continue eating. I have a lot of people actually, sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I ate and then I was still hungry after, so I ate more. And I'm like, well, how long did you wait? And also, why were you hungry after just eating a meal? Like, we have a lot of factors here to work with. But you just need to slow down, chew your food, take pauses between bites, and that can really help with satiety because you're just allowing your brain to catch up to what you're actually eating. And a lot of studies show if you eat slower, you actually could eat less as you go throughout the day because you are just more full and more satiated. So this has a really big impact on how people feel.
This
And
is
then
a
last,
move that my all children have perfected. My kids have perfected this too. If they shove food in their mouth very quickly, which we're working on, and then they ask for a second helping. And this happened this morning when I made a bunch of eggs, and then they were like, "Can I have some more eggs?" And I said, "Sure." Turn back on the pan, crack the egg, and they're like, "Never mind, I'm full." Which is good. Like, I'm not going to force them to eat, of course, but it's, again, children are just so much more primal than we are sometimes. It's a
yeah.
good reminder of like they just needed a few minutes to let their brain catch up. And I think we're all guilty of that too. We're running around, we're stress eating, we're in between jobs and meetings, and sometimes we just don't give ourselves enough time to let that catch up. So it's a really good point. It seems obvious, but we're all guilty of it.
Yeah, and actually going back to that, if you're the type of parent who like you put food on your kid's plate and you make them eat everything even though they are full, that can lead to issues with hunger and satiety regulation when they're older, not overeating. Like being told to eat when you aren't hungry when you're little can definitely cause impacts of that like later on, which is confusing because you also want to make sure your kids eat enough food for fuel. I know you have the right intentions, but sometimes we have to respect like when someone is full of just like accepting that that is their truth.
Yep.
And even if there's food waste and it's annoying, it is what it is, like let it go.
Yep.
Okay, a few other honorable mentions for satiety would be sleep and stress. I already mentioned sleep, how if you're not sleeping, it can increase ghrelin and just can impact your hormones overall. But stress is another thing. If you are highly stressed, that can increase cortisol, which can lead to more cravings. If you have an imbalance there or blood sugar regulation issues, that can very much lead to increased cravings or just feeling like you are never satiated. And you can eat a big meal and not feel satiated. That can also be a sign that something as far as hormones or stress is going is off. A lot of people also, this is interesting, can eat a big dinner, right? Let's say it's savory. Maybe you have like steak, potato, and green beans, and you're really full. And then all of a sudden dessert comes out. It's a whole different palate. It's sugar. It's something very new. It's fresh. And you can eat like another 500 calories or more on top of that, where like you would never have more steak. We do this like weird thing when we introduce something different, like we get like, the second stomach or you're able to eat it. So that also has a lot to do with your palate and the types of foods you are choosing. But there is a really interesting component there when it comes to, cortisol and all that stuff. So ultimately, when we have cravings, it is an intense desire to eat a specific food, often driven by another factor than hunger. Yes, there are physiological cravings. I'm not going to deny that. But usually that's just not the case when we're talking about cravings. Quite rarely do I see that it's actually the body lacking in specific nutrients while everything else is in good working order. When you have this biological urge to eat something and you're not hungry, this is usually related to the brain's reward system, hormones, and your emotional states. This is where, when someone has a bad day and they want to eat junk food, this is exactly what's going on. And this also has a lot to do with dopamine. So when you eat something enjoyable or that tastes really good to you, dopamine is released. That makes you feel good, makes you feel happy or whatever, and that reinforces the behavior. Like when I eat ice cream, I feel good or I feel happier, until you don't the next day or whatever. But in that moment, it's really comforting. It feels really good to you. We have a lot of studies already that show that consuming high sugar foods lights up the same brain regions as addictive drugs. So that's exactly what's going on when I say like you can be pretty addicted to food and you may think it's a craving, but it's actually a little bit more of like an addiction or a dependence you have going on that's making it feel almost impossible to resist. A lot of people who struggle with cravings don't feel like they have the ability to say no. They actually feel like they have an intense need to have the food. They are fixated on it and they don't feel okay until after they have it. And it's this like repetitive cycle that can be really tricky. But some things that also make the dopamine fire even more are hyperpalatable foods. Hyperpalatable foods are high in sugar and high in fat, or both. Fun fact, foods found in nature rarely have sugar and fat in them. Most foods are either have more sugar or have more fat. With the processed foods increasing, they combine sugar and fat. Let's think of like baked goods. They have high sugar and high fat. They taste really good. You get that mouth feel that is like nothing else. Like, or if you eat a Pringle, like that taste that like makes you eat the whole sleeve in one sitting, like that is a hyperpalatable situation. Our brains actually don't have the ability to recognize those foods, so they can bypass our natural signals that would tell us to stop eating, right? No one overeats carrots or broccoli because your brain would be like, all right, stop, like I'm done eating all of those carrots. But you can clean out a bag of Oreos, no problem, because it's just bypassing, right? And that's like a really freaky thing that's going on, but it just makes us go back to like certain foods you eat can increase your cravings. So I used to have major binge eating behaviors. I know I've shared I've had eating disorders on here, but one of them truly was like binge eating. I would legitimately eat thousands of calories in one sitting, and this came from intense cravings, like very intensive, and I would only do this with these hyperpalatable foods. Breakfast cereal, even, like it just would never happen with healthy foods, not at all. It would only happen with specific junk foods that, would make me feel a very specific way, and then you feel terrible after. But this is like exactly what happens with most people. If you can't just have one bite of something, you need to have the whole thing, or one cookie leads to 5 cookies. That's exactly what's going on in these scenarios, and it's part of that dopamine reward system in your brain because it's making you feel really good in that moment, the same way doing like a hard addictive drug would. We know better than to do the addictive drugs. It's going to happen. But a lot of people don't put food in the same category, but like a lot of people have, food cravings and addictions going on and have a really hard time stopping. So that is the dopamine reward system. For physiological cravings, which definitely exist, this is really when your body needs a specific nutrient because it's lacking. Some common ones could be if someone craves a lot of chocolate, that could be a magnesium deficiency, or maybe you're really high stressed. When people are really stressed out, their body burns through minerals very fast. So maybe you crave things like chocolate that has a lot of mineral density in there to make you feel better. But I would say instead of actually choosing like Hershey's chocolate bar, we should do a good quality dark chocolate, or maybe some nuts or seeds could actually satiate that. If someone craves red meat, usually a sign of like an iron or B12 deficiency. Fried foods, maybe you have a fat deficiency. Like your body is really, really smart. When you have a strong craving, it's probably saying like we're lacking something, so we're just going to crave the most efficient means to get that in. And also when people undereat, they crave a lot of sugar because they're starving their body of it. Where if you start eating carbs at every meal and like eat enough food per day, your calories are at maintenance, you might not have any cravings because your body is like actually satiated. This is also a reason I think like I have very few cravings now, is because I eat a lot of food in general. My calories are good. I get a lot of protein. I get a lot of nutrient dense foods, and I am like checking all those boxes. But I've had times where my calorie intake was low and I was like thinking about food, like dreaming about food, and that's a sign that like you're not giving your body something it needs either. So that definitely can be, a big part of craving. So you just kind of have to listen in. If you have craved sugar every day for 5 years, that's an emotional thing or a brain reward thing. If you randomly out of nowhere start craving citrus or salty foods, probably an electrolyte thing going on. So there are like, pay attention to if it's like a super weird niche thing. Like me craving beets is weird. It definitely is weird for me. Like, so I kind of, yeah, you're right. I like do listen to that. I'm like, what is that about?
Yeah.
And you can just learn a lot more about your body when it comes to the cravings you have.
Yep. This is obviously really complex, and this is why so much of nutrition comes down to the individual need. Why in our program, one of the first things we do is just look at your typical diet to get a lot of data points on what might be missing, Why are you making the choices that you make? We have yet to use the word willpower. I think, like, obviously we're all adults. Sometimes you have to use willpower. Don't just go to the grocery store and buy 15 boxes of Oreos, because like that's just probably not going to help you hit your goals. But you can see how much more complicated this is than willpower. So be kind to yourself. If you are snacking on sugar a lot, or snacking on anything, potato chips, we covered a lot of different ways you can crave. Send us a note and let us try to diagnose exactly what's going on. I think there's so much talk on social media about just like having discipline. And again, there's a time and a place where, yes, we have to adult sometimes and maybe go for a walk when we don't want to. But so much of this actually is bigger picture, tied to your stress, tied to your lack of nutrients, tied to other things going on in your life. So don't beat yourself up. Sometimes, if you're consumed by this craving, right, Kat, just give in, enjoy it, pick yourself back up tomorrow. Send one of us a note. Like, don't beat yourself up. Let us help you. But be kind to yourself. We all struggle with this, and there's just so much going on beneath the surface.
100%. And one other thing I think is really important to mention is a habitual influence when it comes to cravings. So let's say you work in an office and on every Friday you're used to going out with people after work, having a beer and some pizza or something. If you do that multiple Fridays in a row, now your Fridays are associated very strongly with doing that. And the second you leave work, you might not have had that craving earlier, but like Friday night comes around, you're like, I could really use like a whatever right now. That's usually a habit you've built, not necessarily a craving. So routines are a big part of this. And obviously, like the afternoon slump where everyone wants to have a sweet treat is so common. I hear that from majority of people. And I think there's a lot more to that. It could be you want to leave work, you're bored. It's 3:00, we're almost out, so I'm going to go get a coffee and a donut because I need to like leave this place. Or, I'm just really unhappy with how the day went, so I'm going to ignore that and like eat my feelings. Eat my feelings is a very common thing that people say, but like what's actually going on there? But take note, like if it's a cold day and you all of a sudden want hot chocolate, like do you actually want the hot chocolate, or do you associate being cold with needing hot chocolate? So like we do these weird things as humans to like justify the thing we want for needing it, or like, oh, it's Saturday, I'm gonna have whatever. Like just because it's Saturday, that's okay if you want to tell yourself that, but actually like take a note or like look into this habit of like, do I actually want it, or am I just used to doing it here? And that can be really hard to break, but I do think that's a common thing people struggle with as far as cravings go, is it's just been a routine for so long that you don't know how to have an afternoon go by without like getting up and getting some chocolate from the cafeteria. Like that's just takes, you have to unprogram that. And I would say like if that's you only have to not do that a few times for it to really leave your body. I'm I'm a very routine eater, and sometimes when I want to change what I'm doing, it's hard for like 2 days, and then I get used to the new thing, and then it's fine. But it's just that idea for that one day of doing something differently that's a little uncomfortable, but it does get better. And you need to also know how to manage cravings. So that gets us into the next section here, which we have two things to look at. Physiologically, we can reduce cravings, so your body actually doesn't crave specific foods, and then we can mentally know how to not indulge in things if you are craving it. So we have two different things going on here. I prefer to always go the physiological route first.
Agreed.
If we can get your body not craving these foods, so you're not thinking about it, it's not sending that signal to your brain that it wants it, what a really good place to be. And you have so much power in the foods you eat throughout the day and your meal timing to create a positive scenario for you here. So definitely eat nutrient-dense foods, have protein and fiber at every single meal. This will keep you full, it will keep you satiated, and it really does reduce cravings. I also think having healthy fats at every meal is a good idea, but let's say you didn't have a fat, if you have protein and fiber, you will still feel pretty good. But if you have protein, fiber, and fat at every meal, that's like a perfect trifecta for being very satiated. And a lot of times when people start eating that way, they'll be like, well, I'm not hungry, so I don't need to eat. Where I'm like, yeah, you still can eat. You don't need to be hungry to eat. You're actually getting ahead of having, getting really hungry or irritable or whatever by feeding your body every few hours. There is a big difference between feeling stuffed and not wanting to eat, or just being like, well, I'm not necessarily hungry, but I could eat. and you eat and you feel fine. That's a really good place to be. But hydration is also huge for this. If you're drinking enough water, you will probably feel more satiated. A lot of times hunger or cravings are, a mask for just being really dehydrated. So if you're drinking enough water, that's a really good way to just help reduce cravings. Bonus points, if you put some electrolytes in there, it will probably help you even further not have cravings. But I do think if you know that you just ate a meal and you are now craving something sweet, not a bad idea to have a bunch of water or even sparkling water, or just something, some sort of liquid to also hydrate yourself, and then assess after you're done with that water if you're still actually hungry. Good chances you probably won't be, or the craving will pass. And then this is also leads into blood sugar regulation. That's why eating the protein and fiber is really important. But if you're eating a bunch of processed foods that are carbohydrate dense, lacking in fiber, you better believe your cravings are just going to be higher throughout the day. It's very powerful, the foods you eat, to kind of set you up for wanting more junk later or wanting healthier foods later.
Yep. This is a strategy that has really worked for me with pizza, which is something that I eat every week because it's delicious, and it's also just a family social thing for me to go out with my family or other families in the area. And I used to beat myself up over this because I would go get pizza, and first of all, I'd be so hungry because I'd be saving calories for pizza, which is and is not the right strategy. Mm-hmm. And so I would have 4 or 5 slices of pizza, and then I would go home and I'd feel bloated, and then I would be hungry an hour later. And then, and this is where a lot of the guilt kicks in. You're like, wow, I ate so much pizza and now I'm still hungry, and you're craving more. And the cravings come from a lot of places. It's coming from you had a bunch of carbs. You're also probably dehydrated. You also didn't have protein. Even pepperoni is like a couple grams of protein, And so now my favorite strategy when I can swing it is to have a protein shake that is low carb and low fat before I get pizza, which I know sounds weird and counterintuitive. One of the things we work on in our program is called permission to eat, which is really telling you when you should be eating when you feel like maybe you shouldn't. And having a protein shake and then going to get pizza, you are appropriately satiated before you get there. Have a couple slices. You're not going to binge on it. You're going to feel really balanced after. Or worst case scenario, and I've done this too, is have a protein shake after pizza. If I go at 5 o'clock, like after I pick my kids up, again, not ideal, but you still have a fat with the meal, with the cheese. And then I go home and I'm hungry, and I'm like, you know what? It's because I haven't had protein in 14 hours or whatever it is. And that will really help balance out the cravings, because you will get home from pizza and crave more sugar or anything, and you'll really be hard on yourself. And so eating that food, rounding out your balanced diet, even if it's after the pizza or whatever example is instead of pizza here, can really help. And I know that's a bit of a mindset, messing with your mindset a little bit, but trust us on that. Cal, we use that strategy a lot.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's okay if your meals are a little weird. We have one guy who loves peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I'm like, cool. Find a way to get protein in, and he just adds a protein shake. And I'm like, maybe not my most favorite meal, but I have no issue, and it makes your life easier because you can just have this for lunch, and then you are getting enough protein with the meal. So it might look weird, but I think that's like a perfect use case for protein powder if you have nothing else to work with. Or maybe you have like whatever, and then you have like a cup of yogurt alongside of it. You don't need to eat it all at the same time. You can just have it in relatively the same time frame, and it could be like pretty profound for how you feel afterwards. But I would say if you are someone who has sugar cravings in the afternoon, take a good look at your lunch. Lunch tends to be where people are a little iffy, especially if you work in an office. You might be relying on food that is provided to you, like a catered lunch. They never have enough protein, never to be found. They're always like a sandwich or whatever. Not saying sandwiches are bad, but they tend to lack enough protein. So that could be why you're full or really hungry in a few hours. So maybe you just need to bring like your own protein drink to have alongside that. But really take a look at what your lunch is. Or if you have the afternoon craving, just make sure if you want chocolate or something, you could be pairing it with nuts or just something that also has fat or fiber or something else there. And then you are less likely to overeat in that moment. That stuff can be pretty profound. But Mindfulness is a huge technique for managing cravings. And sometimes mindfulness is just acknowledging that you have the craving and sitting with it, not acting on it, but just being like, okay, I really want whatever right now. And then you just kind of sit with it, tell yourself you're going to give you some time. But if you just acknowledge and then you're like, well, I actually don't need, I'm just used to having it right now. You can kind of like unpack. That can be really, really helpful. And, mindfulness is really just bringing awareness to how you feel in the moment. Maybe you could be like, yeah, but I didn't sleep well at all last night, so that makes sense why I'm a little more hungry today. Or for women, if you know you're about to get your period or your menstrual cycle, whatever phase you're at, that completely impacts your cravings and appetite. So you could just try to understand, and if you're like, okay, I know I'm getting my period tomorrow, so I want chocolate, but that's why, so I'm not going to do that, or maybe have like a chocolate protein shake or something. Bringing that awareness could help you change that habit. It's ignoring why you feel that way and pretending, you need to eat cupcakes or whatever because you had a bad day or you're upset or like the political climate right now is bad, so I'm going to eat like shit. No, all you're going to do is still be stressed out and now your body is suffering. So it's like a double whammy of bad. And then it's just going to increase it so you want it more the next day. And that's a really tough place to be in. And trust me, I've been there with like the daily craving loop. I've had like major afternoon cravings, but if I look back, that's when I was intermittent fasting and wasn't eating anything until noon. So my body was like, give me food, please. And a good sign if you're craving a lot of like peanut butter or chocolate or like high sugar things, it's probably a sign your calories are low. That usually could be an indicator because your body wants the fastest route to get calories or sugar in. So that could be a sign that you're just not eating enough. And when we take a lot of our women and put them on eating enough calories, their cravings tend to completely disappear, or they have the ability to discern if it's actually something they want or it's something they don't actually want in the moment. And it's really hard to do that when you are not fed properly and you have imbalanced blood sugar and you skipped your breakfast. Like, it just makes making those choices a lot harder. So all of those things can be pretty profound. And also distract yourself, call a friend, drink a bunch of water, go on a walk. Like, there are little tactics when you're having cravings to just change the moment you're in. So if you're sitting down, get up, go move. Like, it can actually help move that energy a little bit, and then you might not actually want it. Or maybe you crave something and then you just say, well, let me just get home from work first and let me see how I feel. Good chances you won't have that craving anymore. It could just be a temporary thing. So there's a lot of strategies here, and I know this is complex stuff, but it's actually pretty simple if we took a look at your habits and what you're eating, as far as being able to at least minimize cravings as best as you can.
Yep. Yeah, boredom is not your friend, usually, when it comes to cravings.
Yeah, totally. And that's why usually when people are really high stress, like busy high stress, they're not eating. They're not eating all day long, and then they come home and then they overeat. The moment their body has a second to be like, let's calm down, they will overeat. And I know there are people who are stressed and they eat a lot of food, but I would say that's probably not the stress of like busy schedule stress. That's stress of like emotional stress, or I'm upset about something long term. Those tend to be people who overeat as a reaction. But either way, we all handle stress a little weird, but if you are sleeping properly, you also will probably notice your cravings drop, and that can be amazing for a variety of reasons, but getting your hormones regulated has everything to do with hunger. And if you're not hungry in the morning, I don't think you need to be like hungry, but you should be able to eat. If the idea of eating sounds like so off-putting or so terrible, like within 2 hours of waking up, you could also have some metabolism issue, a little sluggish there, or like your hormones might just not be optimized at the right times. And if you always skip breakfast, then like that's the reason you're not hungry, because your metabolism is not on at that time saying like, oh, we need to break down food. So there's a million reasons this could be happening. And if you have very specific cravings, definitely let us know, because we could help you with like whatever that unique situation you have going on is, because this is hard stuff. And I'm sure if you told me or Andrew, we would be able to pinpoint it like pretty quickly what you have going on.
That's right. It's nuanced. And one more thing on that note, something that's worked for me that we've seen with clients too, is sugar is a big one, in terms of cravings, and a lot of times it is actually the sugar over the sweetness. I know we think sweet and that tastes good and it's kind of like a reward, but there's been studies that show that your brain can tell the difference. So there's, again, it's nuanced. Like if you're drinking a soda every day and you switch from regular sugar to diet to an artificial sweetener, there's some benefits there. But at the same time, like if you're getting a baked good that is, quote, sugar free, and it's not scratching the itch, it's because your brain can tell the difference. And so you might actually be better off stocking up on a ton of fruit, which I know can sometimes be vilified because it's sugar, but it's not even close to the same thing as refined sugar that comes in a package. And sometimes just eating a lot of fruit or even eating dried fruit can really help scratch that sugar craving more than a baked good that says it's sugar free. Or like what are the smart food, like the gummy worms that they sell at Whole Foods that are sugar free.
Oh, yeah.
Like you might just be better off actually eating sugar in the form of a complex or a simple carbohydrate. So again, it's nuanced here, but try not to get too caught up in a lot of like the marketing, all the artificial sweeteners. I found that works for me is just, go hard on the whole foods.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, honey, dates, like that could be a really good one. And also, like, we believe in moderation here. So if you have a strong craving for something, like work it into your day if you really want to. That's the reason we do macro tracking, is because it makes it pretty easy to see that. Sometimes I'll have clients say to me like, oh, I'm really craving blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's work it into your macros. And they're like, nah. They're like, actually don't want it that bad. They just think they do. And then you log in, you're like, I would rather eat a meal for what I'm going to spend on that. So sometimes knowledge is power. Once you actually realize the nutritional context of what you want to eat, or if you want to, have a glass of wine and then you realize that's going to take up like 30 grams of carbs out of your day, maybe you're like, okay, I actually don't want this as bad as I thought. So there's, a lot of different ways to approach this, but, just try to understand the difference between a craving and like a habit versus you're upset or like an emotional urge to eat. Like all of those things are very different. And at the end of the day, if you're legitimately actually hungry, eating will satiate that. If you are eating and then afterwards you still want sugar, you're not probably actually hungry for it. Like there's something deeper going on there, which is really simple if you just start cueing into your, hunger cues a little bit more. Just start paying attention to like, what is your brain actually telling you about the thing you want to eat? There's a lot of things we tell ourselves around food. We all have a very unique relationship with all different food groups. But it's really up to you to like understand how it makes you feel. And then once you figure that out, you have the ability to make a change. But it's really hard to make a change if you don't understand the nature of your cravings first. So I just recommend everyone think about that like a little bit more, and that's like a really good place to start.
Great. And we've mentioned many times how personal, nuanced this is. We are going to do a live training on this soon. You can register in the show notes, which will give you the opportunity to come prepared with any specific challenges you have. Because as you can tell, there's a laundry list of reasons why you might be struggling with cravings or hunger. And so we can help answer that. And then, of course, that will lead into our challenge as well in April, where we get to get coached by us for free or close to free personally, which will be really fun as well. So lots of ways we can help you get this right, especially before summertime, when we're going to be a little more self-conscious, a little more tempted, a little more outside of our comfort zones. It's a good time to get this in a good place before all of that happens this summer. Anything else we didn't cover, Kat?
I don't think so. That was a lot of stuff.
It was a lot. Well, so be kind to yourselves, educate yourself on what could be happening. It could be hydration. It could be boredom. It could be nutrient lacking. It could be stress. There's a lot going on. Reach out to us. You can find Kat on Instagram at CatBestWellness. You can find me on Instagram at AndrewHayesLife. You can register for the live training on this in the show notes. And you can, of course, join our Alta Life community on WhatsApp, where we always promote all of our trainings and challenges so you'll be the first to know. Discounts, giveaways, all that fun stuff. And we'll see you for the next one. All your sweet teeth.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.